Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and a happy new year. As we begin 2021, the Head Foundation is honored to host this, our second practitioner-focused webinar series, looking at a positive school culture in the new normal. Right now, many of us in the region, particularly in Southeast Asia, are still grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. Some countries are still in lockdown, while others are gradually beginning to open up. Schools are still affected. Not everyone has the good fortune of being able to return to the classroom, and some learning still has to occur virtually. At the same time, school leaders, teachers, and educators are struggling with trying to ensure that any form of learning loss is minimalized and students are able to keep up with the curriculum. As educators in Singapore and the region struggle with these challenges, it is important that we keep in mind the culture of the institution, of the school, and of the community. So in this webinar series, we hope to be able to unpack some of those issues. Why is the school culture important? How can a school culture benefit, especially during a time of crisis? Is it really that important? Who is involved and who is going to be integral in building the school culture? And most importantly, how do we go about doing that? Many of us are still grappling with the COVID crisis, many of us working from home, teachers educating their students virtually at a distance. So how do we think about this issue of a school culture? How do we build a positive school culture? And how can such a school culture help us navigate not just this, but any future crisis? In this series, we'll unpack and discuss some of these issues, along with other interesting topics that are of relevance to the idea of building a positive school culture. We're also very honored during this series to have speakers from Singapore, from the Philippines, and from Indonesia, sharing their perspectives, their experiences in building, maintaining, sustaining, and nurturing a positive school culture. This series will be moderated by the former Dean of the Singapore's Academy of Principals, Mrs. Belinda Charles, who happened to also be my former principal. And ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, it's my great honor to introduce the moderator of this series, to introduce our speakers for the first session on building a positive school culture in the new normal, Mrs. Belinda Charles. Mrs. Charles, over to you.
Good afternoon to all of you. So wonderful to know that there are so many of you eager to learn about school culture, especially in this time of great change. And going forward, we can see that the change keeps on coming, doesn't it? Not less because COVID-19 isn't stopping and seems to be having a second run in some of our countries. So change is inevitable. But how do we face this change? We have seen that we can manage change better in a safe environment of trust and goodwill. This environment basically is the culture of your school. And we believe that the leaders of the schools and the community contribute significantly to this. We have three panelists with us, each with a different experience, so that you can hear from different angles. Let me now introduce them, beginning with the one who's going to start first, and that would be Miss Shiarell Loida Cruz, who's principal at the Ramon Magsaysay Elementary School in the Philippines. She was a teacher for 20 years before passing the principal's examination in 2014. Her passion for education has taken her to different cities in the country as a trainer and a resource speaker. Following that, we will have Mr. K Govindan. Mr. Govindan is the former principal, a retired principal in that sense, of a Peiying primary school in Singapore. He has been an educator for 37 years, rising from a classroom teacher through the ranks to head of department, vice principal, went on to headquarters to be a senior quality assessor before then becoming principal. He believes that the key to being an uplifting force in a child's learning is using innovative strategies to bring joy to learning for every child. So you can say that's the culture he believes in. And finally, last but not least, is Mdm Moliah Hashim. Mdm Moliah is the principal of Princess Elizabeth Primary School in Singapore. Prior to this, she was the Chief Executive Officer of Yayasan Mendaki for a period of 4 years, from December 2009 to December 2013. During the span of her career, she has held several key appointments. And though I first knew her as head of department in the junior college that we were both in, she went on first to become principal of Northland Primary School and then to be a superintendent of a cluster of schools. Then she went to Mendaki, and after Mendaki, she came back to serve once more as principal at Princess Elizabeth. To date, although looking at her, you wouldn't believe this. To date, she has served at Ministry of Education for 35 years. Okay, those are our 3 speakers. We will now be doing a poll, all right? The results of this will be revealed at the end before the Q&A session, but here's the poll. Who, in your view, has the greatest influence on school culture? Is it school heads? Is it teachers, parents, students, the community, or just as importantly, sponsors and donors? Which of these? Do click on one and press submit, and then we will collate the results. But in the meantime, let me bring on the first speaker. I told you just now that this is Miss Shiarell Loida Cruz, all right? And she has a unique experience of the 3 because she led a new school in the middle of the COVID-19. So she definitely knows something about encountering culture. So over to you, Shiarell.
Good afternoon, Professor Vignesh and Ms. Belinda. Thank you so much, and to all the participants of this webinar. I am Mrs. Shiarell Loida Cruz, Principal 1 in Schools Division of Quezon City here in the Philippines. Allow me to share with you my experiences in Ramon Magsaysay Elementary School as principal leading a positive school culture amidst of the pandemic. What is a school culture? If a teacher walked into a school, how would he pick up the culture? Thomas J. Giovanni defines culture as the most powerful source of leverage for bringing about change in a school or any organization for that matter. Just a quick background of my schools before Ramon Magsaysay Elementary School. From 2016 to 2020, or about 3 years, I was the school principal of Bayanihan Elementary School. The school has 575 learners, 19 teachers, and 6 non-teaching personnel. It is one of the small school and training ground for the new principal in our district. But because of quite a number of senior principals retired last 2020, our school's division superintendent transferred me to Ramon Magsaysay Elementary School, which has 1,500 learners, 45 teachers, and 10 non-teaching personnel. So the start of my journey began in June 6 of 2020. It was a big trial for me because it was in the period of the pandemic also. But I need to accept my work and my station for the new position in Ramon Magsaysay Elementary School. And I accept the challenge, and for me, I take upon the positivity and leading this school. Education must continue. This is what our education secretary always says. Whatever calamities, disaster, or pandemic, our secretary believes that there is a way to push through the class opening to ensure that education of Filipino learners will not be further disrupted, and with utmost consideration of the health and safety of our learners and teachers. But if school opening will push through, whether online or face-to-face, some of the questions in my mind: what are the challenges I may face in the current climate while maintaining the culture of the school? What are the cultural changes that might take place within the school context because of the external factors? For the schools to be properly guided, following the country health protocols, the Education Department gave us the order to adopt the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan for school year 2020 to 2021 in the light of the COVID-19 public health emergency. We were asked to plan our school-based activities prior to opening of classes. So beginning of June of 2020 to August, this serves as our timeline and checklist of the things that we need to prepare for the school, for the teachers, parents, and also for the learners. The task is not easy to do at first because I didn't have any background of what the student and the teacher's profile are. The school culture is also a big part of the planning. But I remember Edgar Schein, a former professor at the MIT Sloan School of Management. He is well known for his groundbreaking work on the organizational culture model, or the levels of culture, which is the artifacts, espoused values, and basic underlying assumptions. This is how Ed Schein's organizational culture triangle looked like. It details 3 layers of organizational cultures, where you can see the basic underlying assumptions is at the bottom, because these are the foundations on which culture is based. The middle layer is the espoused values, which talks about organizational values using public statement. And the last one is the artifacts, where all visible signs of culture in an organization is seen. They are differing levels of importance and in shaping the actual culture in an organization. So before I was assigned in my school, I knew how competitive they are. They are also one of the performing school in the district. This is part of the positive, strong culture that Ed Shines described as the underlying assumption. These are the culture that are difficult to describe, but they exist and very powerful. So as principal, I should fit in with this culture by making sure students in our school should be consistent achievers and active performers when it comes to academic and non-academic programs. Another example of this level is if the students are achievers and performers. Same is true with the teacher working in the school. The teachers train the students and their teaching pedagogies are very effective for them to develop the skills of the learner. So as a leader, I need to support them and improve them so that teachers should be achievers in their own field of expertise. They should see themselves as writers, researchers, innovators, and also academic leaders. For the espoused values, these are testable in the physical environment of the core values beliefs on the way things should be done. The core values that the school promotes will reflect on the relationship of the teachers and the support of the parents to their children. In all schools in our country, we highly encourage our staff to support a school environment that is child-friendly. From the way we speak to the children up to they teach them, so school can train them to be God-fearing, humane, nationalistic, and caring for the environment. For the artifacts, this is the level of culture where things are visible and gives the first impression. If you visit the school and the school ground is tidy or clean, then you immediately say, oh, the school principal values the culture of cleanliness and orderliness. If it is true action, like all the learners show politeness, you will praise the discipline style of the teacher and the school as well. So they say, first impression lasts. As a school principal under the new normal in education, leveling the culture in the school helps me to determine its characteristics and address issues on challenges, hindrances, apprehension, nervousness, gloom, and envious that may arise because of change. They say that principal is a CCS. CCS stands for Chief, Culture, and Shaper of a Positive School Culture. Principal as Chief, meaning you need to have a clear vision and mission for your school. And if ever, you need to translate it or be transparent to all your teachers and staff of what is your goal for your school. You need to set guidelines on how to monitor school personnel, students, and even the community. A principal is also a role model of positivity, and principal values actions should reinforce activities in the school. Principal as culture. As a school principal in a healthy culture, never forget that you are the role model. You should be organized. You should be visible to all stakeholders. Communicate regularly and purposely. Be passionate about your work. Accept responsibility for the school culture and always exhibit a positive outlook. So the first 3 months in my school, I always took time to communicate with the city engineers, the medical team, the private school parents, police department, and even some of the secondary school principals as partners. Principal as shaper. It tells us that we need to take pride in the physical environment of our school, empower others appropriately, demonstrate stewardship by protecting the school and its people. So I empower my teachers by encouraging them to show their talent and abilities, especially now that we are adopting the online teaching learning process. We seldom used this before, but today we need to be accustomed to it. I solicit advice from them on how to plan our programs. We seek the generosity of our stakeholders for the donations of health kit, hygiene kits for our school learners, and we are so proud that our local government support all schools by giving school supplies and other private individuals and organizations giving food packs for our indigent pupils. So what are my takeaways? School culture and the impact on leadership style. School leaders greatly influence the change or preservation of the culture in a school. These behavior, norms, and beliefs sometimes challenge the leadership style of the principal or motivate him to improve the school performance and school setting. And remember that leaders are actors who play out the vision and values. Another thing, before you try to change the school culture, understand first the old one and find out the most effective subculture in the organization and use it as a model. And the most important thing, never forget to communicate to your teachers, parents, and students regarding the changes in the school culture that you want them to embrace. Help them to do their jobs as they learn to adapt with the new culture. Positive learning can only take place in a positive, positive culture. A healthy school culture will affect more student and teacher success than any other reform or school improvement effort currently being employed. That is according to Gary Phillips. Culture is the shadow of the leader. Wow. When you say culture is the shadow of the leader, we think that principals come and go in a school. Am I right? They never stay there forever. But the people they work with every day will remember every beat of their leadership style and managing style. How the principal treated them differently, how they touched their lives. So whether positive or negative, that will be their trademark in their school. So it's up to the principal, how do you want to leave your mark for everyone to remember you? True leaders always practice the 3 R's. Respect for self, respect for others, responsibility for all their actions. And we should always remember that because we are the leader, we are the role model of building a positive culture in our school. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shiarell.
Thank you very
I,
much, Ms. Belinda.
I think you have been in that sense, sharing your journey of coming into a new school and trying to understand what it was before you try to make any changes. And in the process of finding out what it was, you came across all these steps about that. While the artifacts were the easiest to see, yet at the same time, you knew you had to go deeper into what were some of the underlying assumptions. And then after that, to go right down to the deep beliefs. And I think every school leader here will knows this, that knowing the deep beliefs of the people in your school is the most difficult.
Yes, it
most
is.
difficult sometimes to find out,
Yes.
but also the most difficult to change after you have found out that, oh no, that's not what I want. And that indeed is what happens when you are on this journey of school leadership, looking for that culture. And so I think you've given us, especially with sharing Schein's model, you have shared with us and helped us to remember. Don't just look at the artifacts. Don't look at the outside. Always look down to the beliefs, because those are the things that either help you guide the change or will derail your change. May I also remind participants that there is a Q&A if there are questions that you want to address to Shiarell, right? And but we will take all questions after the third speaker. But do type in your questions there for Shiarell as well as for the other two which are coming on after this. Thank you very, very much, Shiarell. That was indeed a good opening of somebody who, if you don't mind me saying so, rather young, right? This is your second school. And as you come smack against the culture of an established school, what you found that you had to do about it. Thank you indeed. May I now go on to invite the next speaker to come on. And this is Mr. Govindan, all right? While Shiarell came, that was her second school she was talking about. Govind is coming in at the other end of his career, and he will have a long picture to share with you, a long view. So please, Govind.
Right, thank you, Belinda. Good afternoon, friends. Hope all of you are having a good day today. Let me give some background to set the context so that you could understand better what I'm going to share later, at least to set the context and to get the background. So I retired as school principal on 31st December last year. After 7 years at Peiying Primary School, you can see that school in the background slide. Prior to that, I was a senior quality assessor at the School Appraisal branch and I led teams of schools to validate schools using the school excellence model, which was our own quality model that we use in Singapore. But before that, I was also a school principal for 7 years. So I'm sharing this with you because I would like to later share with you that, the approach I take also can be tweaked according to the context that I'm in. So fundamentally, I'm very people-centered, but I will look at the context that I'm in as well. Okay. Okay, this is the outline of my presentation. I framed it under 3 P's: purpose, processes, people. Purpose, why are we doing what we are doing, right? And combined with structures, processes actually provide the scaffolding for building and sustaining a positive culture. I will share the processes that have been put in place before we were hit with this pandemic, and also what we did during the pandemic to ensure that we sustain the school culture that we built before that. One of my mantras in school management is that I begin with the end in mind, right? And what outcomes do we want to achieve to see for our students and staff? An environment that is conducive to learning for students and for staff engagement. And how do we get there, right? So one of my mantras is we keep in mind the destination and don't short circuit the journey. When I went to this school in 2014, I realized that there was a culture. It was a good culture, but the fact is that it was a little bit different from my own working style because I'm a bit driven. I'm very fast paced, but the school was a successful school, and so I looked at the culture that was existence then, and I tried to grow it further and nurture it further and leverage what was already there, right? So the key really to building culture is leadership. And I took this from Learners Now, and allow me to read this segment. The school takes the personality of their principal. If the principal is mean, the staff will be mean to one another and the kids will be mean to one another. If the principal is full of energy, excitement, and enthusiasm, the teachers will be energized to teach and the students will be excited about learning. The principal can extinguish a flame of positivity or ignite a flame of hope. The principal is responsible for the culture and mood of the school. So this is by Dr. Marcus Jackson, who's actually a principal now in a school in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, culture building is a process and it requires deliberate effort. Allow me first to share how I worked with my staff to identify the desired culture for the organization. Based on my own experience as a senior quality assessor, I realized that it is important for everybody to understand and know what is the desired culture that we want for the organization. If not, there would not be clarity and we will not all be on the same page. So sometimes in my work as an assessor, I found that when I interviewed the staff, different staff mentioned different aspects of culture. And I think for everybody to gel together, it is important to have a common understanding of what the organizational culture is. And so I set out with my school, and it was done together with all the staff to first unpack the school core values, which was PRIDE. PRIDE actually is the acronym, which means perseverance, respect, integrity, diligence, and empathy. These are the school core values. So building culture has to be anchored on values. And we unpacked the values for staff and the students, and we all understood these were our school values. And then we said, what is the culture that we want, that we desire for the organization? And after an identification of the culture and the gap culture gap review, we decided that the culture of care and culture of learning and innovation will be the culture that we want for the organization. For today's session, I'll only have enough time to look at the culture of care. So sustaining a positive school culture during the pandemic, but it was already a challenge for us, with the various things that we had to encounter during the pandemic. But we were fortunate in the sense that we had a very good, caring, collaborative culture and a high level of camaraderie amongst the staff. So we continue to pay attention to the following: learning and well-being needs of our staff, needs of our students. And we kept spirits up and encouraged all to look at the positives. So one of the refrains that you hear in my presentation is that we looked at the positives. We looked at the glass half full rather than the glass half empty. So when I had conversations with my staff or the staff who came back during the lockdown, which we called the circuit breaker, I will have conversations with them to find out what their concerns were. At the same time, I will also ask them what are the things that are going right? So among the things that we thought we weren't ready for initially was the use of ICT, right? But during the pandemic, okay, in fact, before, at the end of 2019, when we did a learning needs analysis of our staff, the staff had indicated ICT pedagogy as one of the areas of need for learning in 2020. So when the pandemic struck, it just accelerated. We just had to learn fast. I mean, before this, we hardly ever used Zoom or Google Meet or Classic Cake or for marking, So during this pandemic, everybody started to learn from one another, and we had an online course. But at the same time, I think what made the difference really was the support groups to help one another, support groups amongst the teachers. What we realized during this period was that whilst in the past, the experienced teachers, the classroom teachers were very experienced in classroom, they were kind of grappling a little with the ICT part. But the younger teachers who were not as experienced in the classroom were much better at using ICT. So what was so poignant was that the high level of camaraderie and help that each gave to one another to leverage their own learning in the use of ICT so that the students benefited from all of this. And we also looked at the well-being needs of our staff, right? So during this period, we are all working, many of us were working from home, and it was something that was new, we are not used to working. Most of us, we go to school at regular hours, and then we go home, we stay back after school activities. And it was important that, I kept my pulse on the well-being needs of the staff. In the normal situation, we used to have conversations with staff, which we call touch-based sessions in my school. And during this period, I continued with the touch-based sessions, which were formal in the sense because they were structured in for the sessions to be held. And then we also had well-being activities and support. The school well-being committee, led by the school staff developer, continued to organize activities to ensure that the staff were kept engaged, that they knew that there was support for them all the time, and that we were all in this together. I always say that, we are Peiying united, right? And there were also rewards and recognition to kind of urge and encourage our staff along. Some of these rewards recognition were at the national level, and some others were created by the staff wellbeing committee just to motivate and to sometimes just have fun, right? As you can see from the next few slides. So we periodically, we got them little cakes when they came back. In fact, after a certain time, we give them a care pack. When they came back to school after the lockdown, we gave them the masks, the hand sanitizers, the face shields, biscuits and fruits to welcome them back to school after the lockdown. So during the entire period then when there's lockdown and after that as well, we constantly kept a pulse on the well-being of the staff and continued to motivate them and encourage them. And what was again very obvious was the empathy. One of our school core values is empathy, and everybody showed empathy for one another, right? These are some pictures I think you'll find interesting. This one with me looking like Superman. We had a little competition to be superheroes, and I decided that we wanted to be Peiying United, like a Superman in cities, my school, my former school logo, right? And all the while the refrain is let's celebrate blessings, right? And I think this refrain was echoed through the organization, where everybody felt that, you know, whilst we are going through a pandemic, while things have been a bit disrupted, but yet we have to count our blessings, and with that, we will do our best for our students. And we also continue to acknowledge staff for their achievements. So by giving certificates, we took individual shots, but you know, when we did Zoom, we put it all together and we celebrated everybody's achievements, and that kept spirits up and everybody felt recognized as well. But really, P for people, the differentiating factor really is the people. I think all of you are familiar with this quotation: the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers and principals, since student learning is ultimately the product of what goes on in the classrooms. But in this regard, in terms of what we have done, is about engendering a culture of care anchored on values. That's one thing. And the other is to build trust by showing empathy. So working from home was, like I said, something new, right? And whilst it might seem, you know, normally we come to school to work, but what I found was that teachers spent a lot more time working at home than if they were working from school. And in addition to that, they also had to mind their own kids, those of the teachers who had their own children, because their children were also at home. And the teachers, whilst they had to care for the students, they also had to mind their own children who were at home. And I think the reason how we came through this is because of the empathy that we showed to one another, right? And in terms of the culture of care, whilst we have structures in terms of touch-based sessions, you know, conversations with teachers, I think what I thought to do that probably made a difference was to personally engage the teachers whom I felt would need more help. For example, the teachers who might be struggling with ICT, you know, I'll just drop them a message, or when they come to school, on the days that they could, I will ask them how they are doing, right? And if they have children at home, I'll ask them, how are your children doing at home? You know, in addition to you helping the students that you are teaching in school. And if they have difficulty in ICT, I also ask them, how are you doing in that area? So basically, I kept a pulse on how the staff was doing. And we also took care of the what we call the executive and admin staff, or the non-teaching staff, because they were providing a lot of support. And we also needed to show empathy for them and care that they too, you know, were looked after, because of this period, we are mobilizing them for doing a lot of sanitizing, cleaning and all that. And so we also did that. So again, I think the element of trust is very important, because these are the softer aspects of building culture. We can have structures, we can have processes, but the difference are the softer aspects that the leader shows, as well as the staff shows to one another, and what the staff show to the students that they teach. And that all, you know, goes for creating a culture that is sustaining and will help us achieve the outcomes that we want in terms of student learning and staff engagement. So just some tips, almost a last slide, on how you know, we can leverage school culture and turn adversity into advantage. Begin with the end in mind. I mentioned to you that, you know, when I went to this school, We work together, and for clarity, we discuss and say, this is the type of culture that we want. And then we put in place processes to achieve, because if we don't put in place processes and we leave it to chance, then the culture may not be sustained. But because, we did that, we're able to sustain the culture. So we adopt a structured approach to culture building with action plans and strategies, but we gave as much attention to the softer aspects. And that makes a huge difference, and leadership plays a very important part in that. And we celebrated efforts. We celebrated efforts, and we thanked everyone continuously for the blessings and for helping one another and being a support to one another. I want to end off with this slide. Some years ago, I attended a conference and I found out about Professor Sumantra Ghoshal, and he speaks about the smell of the place. He mentioned this place in France, Fontainebleau. It's a forest, and he speaks about the environment in Fontainebleau during spring, and he says it's motivating and it's invigorating, and it kind of aspires people to do their best. So this is he feels that an organizational context should be like Fontainebleau, where you feel invigorated and you feel that the smell of the place is something that you want to go to every day. So Peiying Primary School, of which I was a principal, may not necessarily be Fontainebleau, but we were working towards it. Of course, we don't have spring, but I can say safely that when the feeling that even short-term visitors had when they came to Peiying Primary School was that they felt welcome. They felt a palpable culture that was warm, inviting, and all the staff, attest to that, because they too, have feel this warmth, and they are motivated and they're encouraged to do their best. And this culture is also validated, so to speak, because we have annual staff surveys, not annual, once in 2 years, conducted by the ministry. And the data suggests that, the staff are indeed very engaged. So with that, you can watch this video by Professor Sumantra Ghoshal on the link that's given, or you can just Google and you can watch the video. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'll be able to take any questions later, because given the time, I shortened some aspects of the presentation, especially the processes part. But really, I'm ready to take questions later if you have any. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Govind. What a wonderful thing to share with us, this thing about the smell of a place. That is just so interesting, that yes, that culture can be a smell, it can be a feel, and that when it is palpable, then people respond to it. But what struck me most about your presentation was the great importance you placed on encouraging your teachers and showing a culture of care. I think particularly because COVID-19 and its possible infection on people, etc., did spread a climate of fear. And you and your school countered it with this spirit of care, right? Yes. And this was your culture, your counterculture to COVID-19. That when people felt that they were cared for, and that and how did you show that care? You showed it by supporting them, because they were going through having to do IT, doing all these very different ways of teaching. But because they felt supported, instead of being criticized, instead of being told, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, but instead you were just supporting them, I am sure in that sense, Peiying School smelt beautiful.
Yes, I think so.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And yes, I do encourage participants to watch that video as well as to put up questions to Govin about certain aspects that you might want to know more about. Our last speaker, Mdm Moliah, is going to give us the big picture. All right. She has been with the school for some time, and she has been doing a lot of things to establish a culture that she feels it's worth, it stands up to the name of the school. You may have noticed that the name is a little unusual, Princess Elizabeth, whereas we all know of a Queen Elizabeth, but that shows how old the school is. It was named when the Queen was a princess, and that would have been in the 1940s. So over to you, Moliah.
Thank you, Belinda, and hello to my fellow panelists and all of you who are here with us at this webinar. Great to see you in good health. Belinda probably forgot to tell you that you're going to be going on to a bullet train ride with me. Having heard from the veteran Govin and the passionate young principal Shiarell, I am tasked to offer an overview of how a school's journey in building a positive school culture can be conceptualized. So it's rather conceptual, very dry, but I'll do my best. I would like to state categorically that while I'm here as a school principal in a Singapore school, all deliberations I make are my own and they don't reflect the Ministry of Education Singapore. So Govin and Shiarell have shared with us what school culture can look like and smell like, and I would like to add on to the discussion with a little bit more attention given to the matter of beliefs and values, which were reminded culture building is not exactly a straightforward affair. I will use my journey with Princess Elizabeth Primary School thus far from 2014 when I took over the principalship. I hope to show how deliberate the process of cultural building is and some of the encouraging indicators of how we have benefited from the journey. And I will end my presentation in the 20 minutes with a sharing of how positive school culture we have been working on proved to be an important part of the school ecosystem to minimize COVID-19 disruptions and help us stay on course. We are all familiar with Michael Fullan's work, and for today's purpose, I have decided to use this definition as our reference point, as it centers on the idea that what a school does and does not is pretty much determined by the beliefs and values of its constituents. Michael Fullan talks about the attitudes and expected behaviors that are guided by the belief system. I thought it's also quite useful to think of the school culture as everything that is about written as well as unwritten rules that govern and influence all aspects of school. So what's the relationship between the kind of culture that is in a school and its chance of success in achieving its goal? Shiarell talked about the Schein's triangle level of culture, and how does it affect the way the school is run, the way the school functions, such that it can achieve its goals. So we have heard from both Govin and Shiarell that culture is something which can be shaped. It's organic, it develops over time, and it is really a product of dominant beliefs and values. And if there's such a thing as positive culture, bringing about positive outcomes, then the reverse must be true, that there is such a thing as less than positive school culture or even negative school culture, that instead of improving teaching and learning, a vicious cycle is triggered, resulting in declining academic performances, perhaps, and affecting the confidence of students and teachers, and may even bring about a sense of hopelessness and apathy. And another interesting point is no school would espouse values that are so-called negative. So how do we begin to explain the less than positive culture that sometimes can be quite evident? So the challenge is to understand human motivation beyond the guiding beliefs and values. In this table, I try to illustrate how some common values held by educators may bring about different sets of attitudes and hence different behaviors. Take the belief in the importance of lifelong learning in this ever-changing world, both for students and educators alike. This belief should translate into careful design of the curriculum with pedagogical approaches that will bring about deep learning. And we all know that a strong conceptual understanding is critical to higher order learning at the next level. Unfortunately, there may still be prevalence of teachers teaching to the test and students quite happy about rote learning. And if lifelong learning is believed to be relevant for the teachers, we should be able to see a vibrant learning community that looks to improving teacher competence that will prepare them for changes in subject matter as well as student profile. So where the values guide behaviors positively, we will see a school culture that emphasizes on authentic and purposeful learning. And where the behaviors are not so positive, it may be a culture where it is acceptable to simply finish the syllabus without consideration of how the students are learning. So what this means is that while beliefs and values are core to shaping a positive culture, it is certainly not enough. So the question is, what are the barriers to enacting the espoused values? Is it about motivation? No reason to behave in a particular manner because there is no consequence, perhaps? Or is it about the lack of competence, little self-awareness, loose supervision, or a case of lack of support, no time and space, and perhaps expertise or help provided to do the right things? Could it be even conflicting values? School looking at efficiency instead of efficacy? Or do we demand autonomy from our teachers and yet want to make sure that they are aligned? Or perhaps even a misalignment of personal values with the organizational values, what we call a misfit. The teacher does not have the teaching dispositions that will make her or him a good, effective teacher. So in making sense of this complexity, we can ask ourselves the following questions. Is it something identifiable? Is it something actionable? And if it's identifiable and actionable, then we probably can measure this. And if we are clear and we get clarity of these cultural elements that are identifiable and actionable, we probably will be starting on our culture building journey. So let's look at how we can identify that trigger in order for us to get the virtual cycle of positivity. So this is an example of a framework that can guide one in culture building. It is a reiterative process. So while it is linear, we have to come back to the processes throughout and continuously so. And for each of these phases, right, there are important questions to ask. So we won't know how to go if we don't know what we want. So the questions that we need to ask would be, what kind of culture do we want? What kind of culture do we need in the school that we are leading? Whether it is for a new principal or for a principal to go to another school, a different school, these very first questions are very important. We need to contextualize, we need to define, do we really know what we want out of this culture building effort? And we need a lot of information, data. Shiarell talked about artifacts. Shiarell talked about espoused values. She also talked about deepening understanding of the assumptions, belief system, not just what we can see, but what we can understand and what we can surmise sometimes. And in order to do this, we need to ask if there are already current structures that we need to leverage to draw up a plan of action. And having that plan of action, we need to communicate effectively. What will we be communicating? Who do we will we be communicating to, and when? And how do we gain support and buy-in? And who do we want to be included in the implementation of the plans that we have? And continuously, we need to monitor. We can't leave this alone and forget about it and expect that things will go, the way we want it. We need some deep sticking. We need throughout our leadership of the school, find moments, opportunities in order to test if our track is right. So let's go over to Princess Elizabeth. This is a neighborhood school, a typical neighborhood school in terms of its size as well as its facilities. Quite an established school. When I took over it in 2014, we have about 1,350 students with about 100 teaching staff and about 20 admin staff. It is considered high sought after school with long waiting lists and probably a very good record of PSLE results, which is the culminating examination for primary school education, and which is a very high stake examination for Singapore. So first, the context. So like I said, established a school and a school of choice, and with lots of achievements and receiving lots of schools locally as well as internationally, used as a benchmark school for others because of the innovative programs that the school had over the years. Quite stable, but rather aging staff profile, and very interesting to see how most of the teachers, most of the staff in the school are happy to be in the school and stay, and they are almost retiring for school for them. So very stable staff. When I first took over the school, the first things that I know that was important for me to take note was that not only I was newly posted to the school, the other two school leaders, the vice principals, were also new to the school. And we had a middle management that needed renewal, that needed strengthening. And that was the first thing that I noted. And the school, like I said, has been very successful. The school vision, mission have served the school, in fact, very well. When we dig further and when started on this journey, there were lots of indicators that suggest to us that we need to relook some of the major key frameworks in the school. We could sense the great pride and love for the school, not only by the students and the staff, but also by the community surrounding it. More conversations led to an understanding that there is an issue of trust, that we needed to talk about trust. Not so much trust in a sense of trusting if the teachers can be more creative, trusting if the teachers can be more innovative, and if they can actually try out new things. Yet at the same time, trust from the leaders, whether the teachers have the competency to do it, whether the teachers will know how to go about doing it. So trust was something we needed to have a conversation on. But we knew straight away that there was a culture of very hard work, diligence, individual responsibility and accountability very high. And everybody was very results and awards driven. And over the years, we could see a change in the profile of the students. And in a way, it's reflecting also the trends in terms of the school results and the school's journey in innovation. So we have somewhat plateaued by that time, and some programs needed a revamp, and a new sense of energy, new motivation was very much needed. We took our time because some of the aspects of the culture are really sensitive. We needed to bring along this very loyal, diligent staff members of the schools along to see if there is a need to change the tried and tested ways. And of course, we learn a lot from others. And each of these references that I have put here are very important to us because they guided us on knowing what kind of systems and key frameworks we wanted to be placed in our school in order for us to be guided in implementing programs, at the same time influencing school culture in a positive way. So we look to the fifth discipline for learning organization and Jim Collins' idea of the culture of discipline. was important to us. Positive education gave us the culture of care, and definitely being innovative and innovation being the school niche also give us the guidance to be innovative in the way we think about things, solving problems, and thinking about the skill sets that needed to be innovative. This is a very busy slide, but don't worry too much about it. The details are not important. The idea is to show that once you start on a staff strategic planning process, it is reiterative. It is something which you need to revisit, sometimes not entirely, sometimes pieces of the strategic plan, but it is an ongoing process. And at each stage of the, or each phase, the renewal is important. What I wanted to show was that in this reiterative process, a good strategic plan that can guide the school is very, very useful. People know exactly what is needed, who is doing what and why, and all this will be captured in the school strategic plan. But the key point here is that while we work on schools programs to implement, to achieve our desired goals, we must pay attention to the cultural fabric, right, that would support the implementation of the program. Peter Drucker coined the term culture eats strategies for breakfast, meaning that it doesn't matter how detailed and fantastic and inspiring your strategic plan is, if you don't have the culture that supports it, then everything can fail. So just a little bit of elaboration on the cultural aspect of the strategic plan. We knew what we wanted to see in the children. We wanted them to be lifelong learners. We wanted them to be future-ready citizens. We know in order for them to be that, to be plugged into the changing world, then the staff must be transformational themselves. And by transformational staff, we needed to articulate exactly what that means. So the culture of discipline to make sure that there is a way of professionally growing so that we can lead and care and inspire the children. There is a culture of seeking improvement all the time, and therefore be innovative in the way we go about things. And definitely, to top it up, there is a culture of trust as well as a positive culture. And if we get this right, then every staff member can be transformational because they know they are a care advocate, they are a competent professional, and they are a change agent in the school. So if this is right, then we ought to be able to see the outcomes. In the last 4 or 5 years since we started on the strategic planning journey, we saw significant improvements in staff engagement and satisfaction, especially in the first 2-3 years of this journey. And we were validated for many important works that we did through the external assessors, what Govind has shared with you earlier, the body that assesses whether we've got our processes right. We were awarded best practice for staff development and well-being. We continue to be very strong in terms of our academic results and student achievements in inclusive design thinking, in character development, and in student leadership. And it is very affirming to be recognized for our mission-driven staff, to be known to be student-centered and values-driven, and that the culture is a strength of the school. So, of course, the pandemic of last year was a very important test to whether we did get it right in terms of strengthening the way people think and the way people work in the school. So here I put together some slides to just give you in very broad strokes how we saw our cultures, articulated culture panning out in helping us to manage the uncertainties last year. So under the culture of discipline, with the discipline mindset and structures put in place, we managed to continue our business. The business continuing plan was put in place very, very quickly. We were in constant contact with the teachers, constant monitoring of students' well-being, and constant communication with our parents. We've got all our structures and platforms to be able to do so. And because everything had to be scaled down, there was also the necessity to choose the essential. And there was an effort by program owners to make sure that despite the challenges, they would be able to bring the experiences that they have planned for the children. And I would say a large portion of the school experience was therefore maintained in the school in the midst of all these challenges. The innovation mindset and skill set also served us well. Our students responded positively to assignments and invitations to participate in what we call the home-based limited edition challenge. We knew that emotionally, socially, the children were feeling isolated, and we wanted to engage them in something challenging and interesting and new experiences. We took the risk of simply giving them that challenge, and we were very surprised with the reception of both parents and children. The parents collaborated with the children to submit entries for Rube Goldberg challenges, creative art, and video clips of their learning. And that we had a really, really good surprise. And the idea of care went beyond the physical and social and mental well-being of our students and staff to the larger community. We were ahead of some national initiatives to support the children whose parents were affected by the pandemic. And I'm very proud of the school's initiative to bring cheer to our foreign workers. Working with their parents, the children had translations in order to send out messages of love and care through songs in several languages that could be appreciated by the foreign workers, especially in the dormitories. So it is not really hard for us to appreciate the importance of investing in a positive culture that made it possible for us to care for our school community. And I would conclude by quickly going over these key learning points from our experience. Firstly, whether we are leading a school in a national system like ours or a privately run enterprise, there is always a larger education system that we must align to. And in Singapore, the structure is so well developed that it is not difficult to do so. And secondly, to understand what really makes a school tick, we have to provide that risk-free environment. And no one will want to talk about trust as an issue if they don't trust the process in the first place. And to gain ownership, all in the community must feel that they have a stake in the school and therefore be involved in the process of culture building. And involving the right people at the right time with the right purpose means that lots and lots and lots of planning had to be done. And following that, lots of time to use to communicating key messages, communicating with the right vocabulary, seizing every opportunity to bring people back to why we are doing things in a certain way. Yes, there will be lots of tension when people are expected to behave differently. As school leaders, we will have to decide to pick our battles, and we need to maintain consistency, especially in matters of motivation, human motivation and values and belief system. And always be transparent, consistent and transparent. And lastly, see, smell, hear and feel the heartbeat of our schools and enjoy the process. So thank you very much and do stay safe. And I'm happy to receive communication from you or answer your question. Thank you, Ms. Belinda.
Thank you, Moliah. As the last speaker, you have shown us yet another way, another situation where culture is called into question, and then what you did with it. So we can see, as Moliah has promised, all these slides with her details of the challenges you face at each stage. I'm sure they'll be very useful to you. And later Vignesh will be telling you how these can be assessed, right? But in the meantime, if I could summarize, what we did was we've presented three very different experiences. One of a young principal coming into a school and trying to discover what the culture was like and what she needed to do, right? And then a very experienced principal coming into a school and knowing that this was his last phase, right? And also at the same time coming into a school that was generally seen as successful. He saw the culture. It was something he wanted to maintain and to build up even further. And then we came with a rather different experience from our last speaker, Mdm Moliah, because this was a school that was known quite well, expected to be successful, but was successful, if I might put it, in the wrong way, right? If you could say it was wrong. They wanted the outward show, what Shiarell called the artifacts. They wanted the results, right? Whereas as a true educator, Mdm Moliah knew that results are not good enough. The culture needs to change to one of genuine learning that comes and that is bolstered by an atmosphere of trust. And to build this in when people were used to something quite different, yes, that's going to be a challenge. So let's move on quickly into the question and answer. And let's see, I've looked at all your questions, and I think we will start first of all with those that came up, I think both for Shiarell, but also Govind and Moliah. I think you two would have things to share about this, and it was often about, so give us a challenge. Tell us what were some of the challenges. I think because we all encountering challenges, we want to know whether what you encounter is also what we encounter. Or whether, is it only me that is facing this kind of a problem? Okay, so first of you, Shiarell.
Well, thank you, Miss Belinda. Yeah, I've read all the questions. You're also all asking about the challenges I faced, because just like what I described to you, I just new in the school. It's actually on my 7th month this January. So maybe I just place it from the level, but what I have understand about Ed Scheins. Firstly is the physical environment. I did not show it in my slides but actually at present, I have 3 school buildings being constructed in my school.
Oh,
yes.
That's
So
a
just
nightmare.
imagine, yes, good thing that there is no classes, there is no face-to-face classes. So everybody are working 24 hours in a day. So the physical environment really challenged my leadership. And of course, I need to check from every now and then from the building engineer if all the people are healthy and they are safe, especially if they're working until night. And also maintaining the school ground neatly. Of course, every day there are deliveries of gravels and everything. So I cannot maintain that every day. So I always ask my permission to the visitors. I said, I'm sorry for how the place looked like because of the ongoing construction. Secondly, I think the challenge is the absence of the teachers physically. Because every day beginning the school opening, we need to delegate tasks to our teachers because principals are not working alone in the school. What I mean by the absence of teachers, because until now, the teachers are working from home in our country. So they are not physically present in the school every day. So this is a part of a challenge because if I want to ask something for them to do, I need to ask permission first because of the health protocols of the country. So I need to ask permission from our department if the teachers can come to school. So they will be given permission to do that. But sometimes the teachers are so nice. without permission. They actually write certification. Ma'am, I'm willing to help you. I can go to the school and help you with your task. And of course, if I cannot do that, I maximize the technology like what we are having right now. We are doing virtual meeting every week so that I can delegate all the things that I need them to do. I can check on their work, especially their enrollment and the status of their children. And the last one is the student needs. Actually, for them to be able to continue in our school. In estimation, I think a quarter of the population in our school learners are living in a public cemetery, Miss Belinda. So poverty is a big challenge for them because, of course, although we adopt a modular learning delivery mode, we also have this online learning. Because we cannot actually provide all the students in our school with laptops and tablets. So the school needs to tap some stakeholders who can provide not only the school supplies, but of course their basic needs like the food. So what did I do with this? Of course, I cannot do this alone. I started to set my mind positive that after everything that will happen, things will come back in a normal way. So I need to tap some stakeholders who can help me address these challenges. First, the building engineers. Yes, a while ago I told that I constantly communicating with them regarding the safety of the people and also the environment. Teachers maximize the use of technology. I ask them to attend meetings, but of course they are 45. If I'm not requiring everybody to attend, I have 3 master teachers who help me in delegating the task. What I did is I'm just calling them virtually and then I'm telling them what to do and how are they going to give assistance to the grade level teachers that they are assigned to. Family needs of our students. Luckily, I have ACE Ateneo office, one of the general stakeholders of our school. They are a private school here in the Philippines. They adopted 200 families in our school. They give food packs every week. So they give vegetables and all their basic needs for that 200 families. And also our local governments. They provide us all the school supplies, all the actually the modules they provided also for the first quarter. So the supplies and the hygiene kit of our student came from our local government and also our Department of Education.
So I see that there have been many things that you have had to do to try and bridge those gaps. And I think always the question about what do we do with students in need? Let me ask Govind also what he used to do at Peiying.
Okay, for the students in need, we do know which are the students who have higher need. Because during normal school time, there are some students who apply for financial assistance, and we know that these are students. And also because we have a good process in place in identifying the students with special needs, and we have our counselors and our learning support, bureau support officers. So we already know who are these students. So during the pandemic, when we had the school closures, we particularly looked into the students with these things. And we also know which are the students who don't have learning devices at home and who do not have internet access at home. And we provided them with the learning devices and also with the dongle so that they could actually access the online lessons. And for students with even higher needs, we invited them to come back to school in smaller groups with all the safe distancing measures in place. And we assigned teachers to help them cope with the work that they needed to do. So we continued to monitor these students and provided each and every one of these students with the help that they needed.
Right, right. So there you were addressing all the physical, financial needs. I know some students had to come back to school because that was the only way they were going to get the school lunch.
Yes.
Also,
yes, lunch
and,
was also provided.
Yeah, right, right. Could I ask Moliah now to talk about how you have bridged other gaps?
I was saying that some of the things that Govind has described earlier, very much part of the national guidelines to all schools, the provision of categories of students who would need to be supported in all these ways. But I think many schools like Peiying also went to do more than that. One of the things that worried us with the financial assistance students was the fact that in normal times, they would be having their recess and lunch at school. And if they don't come to school, then how will they be provided with that? So that was something that we really were very worried about. So we gathered food supplies and have their parents come and fetch those things. We also extended our help to parents whom we know would have lost their job because you know they were especially the FAS students. And of course, in our case, even the parents who are in the PMETs with stable jobs had problem and had to therefore come forward to us for financial assistance. So this was done in the most sensitive way. In fact, in some cases, we needed to persuade the parents to come and benefit from all these things. Right? So that's economic. I think it's worthwhile to talk about how schools like Peiying and Shiarell School also had to scramble with speeding up, accelerating the the teachers' ability to conduct lessons, asynchronous or synchronous lessons. While we have this in school, in the case of Princess Elizabeth, it's not something which we do every day, and it's not something which all teachers are comfortable with. So we have portions, segments of our teachers whom are able to do some basic connections, but to be on the SLS, to be recording voiceover in their PowerPoint slides, for example, right? To go live on other platforms, that became quite a challenge for us. But fortunately, because we work in teams, that the departments and the levels work in team, and we would have already identified some of our ICT champions who held clinics quite immediately to those who may need help. And the clinics came on fast and furious on every aspect of conducting the synchronous and asynchronous lessons. So we buffed up, right, the teachers who were not able to do this and pair them up and combine some of the classes. I also remember that in some cases where the teachers have got elderly parents or they have very young children requested to stay at home, and we were only able to do that because the other teachers were rallying around the teachers whom we thought should stay home because of their elderly parents. And we allowed for the teachers to even conduct class from their home to the children in the classroom via projection and so on. So those were very important things I think schools needed to do very quickly, learn very quickly how to do. I mean, I learned how to Zoom also during that time.
So did I.
We all did.
Yes.
I see we are running out of time. So there is this last but really important question. Does the principal's attitudes and character contribute greatly in a school culture? So let's start with the youngest first, shall we? Shiarell.
Yes, I think the attitude and the character of the principal contributes in a positive school culture. Because as a leader, you have a leadership function, right? And it affects the process on how you deal with your people. Just like what I said, you have to respect and trust your people. Trust is something very meaningful. If you trust them that they can contribute a lot of things to help you improve the school, trust them about the things that they can contribute and actually to improve the school success, that is a big thing. Respect all the people who work with you.
Right.
Because if you respect them, they will respect your position as well, and they respect any decision that you are about to make when you are asking them to do, and then this is my decision. So respecting the position is actually very important. So as a leader, we need to have those two things, the trust and the respect for each other.
Right. Maybe I can ask Govind how he built that respect and trust in his school.
My answer to the question is yes, definitely the school principal does affect the culture of the school. And the assumption is that all school leaders are grounded on values. Mm-hmm. And if we are grounded on good values, and all schools have got good values as well, then we have to just demonstrate those values, role model those values. Right. And our teachers and our students will take after us and also demonstrate these values. That's how you engender the culture. One of the ways you do it. Of course, there are many other ways as well. So just to give a quick.
I remember that this thing about school values came in only, I think, maybe in this century, right? We weren't so big on it on the 20th century, but with the 21st century, I remember Singapore schools starting to emphasize a lot on the school values. Maybe Moliah, you can give us your take on this. How these school values, because you had Aspire, right? Yes.
Yeah, like I said, the first step is deciding on which values will serve the school, right? Given the context, given the situation, what would be the values that we need to sharpen, not the values that we're already very good in. Right?
Yes.
So, and really coining a value that is compelling is also quite a challenge to school principals. So how do you make it such that it is not 12 values on the wall and the children don't remember what? So some people use the finger, some people use acronyms. So we decided, and looking at the values, that the 6 values that we hold dear, 3 are really values that are ethical in nature, and 3 are performance in nature that would influence the children's idea of ambition, self-discipline, whereas there are values of empathy and there are values of integrity. So we wanted that balance of the different kinds of values.
Very nice.
And I think when you talk about leadership, like Govind and Shiarell has said, modeling is very, very important. You have to believe and you have to show what it's like. You have to show particularly the students what it looks like. So I spend a lot of time unpacking these values. What does it look like to you? What does it look like to us? And our children actually go through a process where they write their own ideas about how do I show respect. And for respect, do I show it only to people? I show respect to the environment, right? I show respect to my friend. I show respect to the book I'm reading. So I'm high on talking and talking about how we do this. And the other thing that school is very high on is the idea of inclusivity. Having come from the self-help group and having come from the community, inclusivity was very high on our agenda. We're a school that also leads in the discussion on special needs support in the zone, as well as the character development. So the team, so what I do is to make sure that the team would be given the space and time and the support, as well as the development opportunities in order for them to be able to do the work best. So the counselor, the AED, LBS are very well supported. And the idea of inclusivity, again, is unpacked. We're not only talking about special needs children, we are even talking about students who are in your class, parents are doing the same job, but have a different home upbringing, different sets of values and different experiences. And we know in order to be inclusive, we must not assume everybody is at the same place. So with that, we work on the teacher-student relationship. We work on the peer relationship among children so that understanding, appreciating the individual in the children, in the individual in the staff is very high on our agenda. And that's what we work on in terms of being totally inclusive.
Thank you, thank you. So in summary, what you three have shared in slightly different ways is about the importance of yourself as the leader on the culture of the school, all right? And why we need to do that is because it is the culture that holds the school together. It is the culture that decides where the school progresses or, God forbid, that it actually regresses, right? But it is that culture that is so strong, and that is the one that also helps us to be resilient, especially when unexpected change comes. And it was the reason in that sense for this webinar, that this idea of making schools resilient through the school culture was something that we were so glad that you three shared your experiences about. let's go now to the poll and see what you all said initially. What you all, meaning all our participants. Okay. Oh, interesting. That originally you felt that teachers had an even greater impact than school heads. Interesting. Because it is true, teachers have a great impact. When I think of the teachers in my school, I mean, when I was a student, I still remember them. In fact, I must confess, I remember them more fondly than I remembered my principal. So yes, it is teachers. But I also do feel that when principals set the culture, it makes those teachers bloom. It makes those teachers really have that sense of well-being that helps them to contribute. And so, yeah, we can see that your leadership, the leadership of all principals, is vital to helping teachers feel that they can grow so that they can have that positive impact on students and on the school. Right. Let me now pass this over to Vignesh for his closing remarks. And thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Charles, Ms. Shiarell, Mr. Govind, and Madam Moliah. I think we've had a really exciting, invigorating, and most importantly, a very meaningful discussion about building a positive school culture. Ladies and gentlemen, today's session is the first of 3 sessions that we will be organizing at the Head Foundation that will unpack building a positive school culture in the new normal. Next week, we'll be exploring the culture of relationships. And in the 3rd week, we will be looking at a culture of learning. Ladies and gentlemen, as I shared in my welcoming remarks, this is the 2nd webinar series that is focused on practitioners that the Head Foundation has organized. The first webinar series, Educational Leadership in a Crisis, was organized and broadcast in September of last year. Recordings of that are available on our website. To accompany that webinar series, we published a handbook for educational leaders that lays out some actionable steps and strategies that they can adopt in navigating not just this current COVID-19 crisis, but the challenging landscape and the changing landscape of education in the region and beyond. Please visit our website and download that handbook and use it if you find it useful. Ladies and gentlemen, just one last administrative matter. The Head Foundation will be issuing certificates of participation for those who request for it if they have attended all 3 webinar sessions on Zoom. So if you're keen to have a certificate of participation, please come back for future sessions. And during the 3rd session, we will share with you a sign-up form and follow the instructions. Let us know and we will provide the certificate as long as you have attended all 3 sessions. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, on behalf of the Head Foundation, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to Ms. Shiarell, Mr. Govind, and Madam Moliah for sharing their perspectives as school leaders on how they built a positive school culture in their institutions during these challenging times. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Charles for moderating this session. And Mrs. Charles will be back next week to moderate our 2nd session, Building a Culture of Relationships. So ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to welcoming you again to next week's session. And on behalf of the Head Foundation, thank you very much for being a part of this session. Have a pleasant day.